This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. What if I told you there is a force so powerful it dictates the fate of nations without ever being elected? A force that can make a democratically chosen government cut pensions, privatize hospitals, fire teachers, and sell off national resources to foreign corporations. A force that has no accountability to the people it affects, no democratic responsibility, yet holds more control over your life than your own government. You might think you know the answer, but I'm willing to bet you don't. Because this organization is so secretive, so entrenched in global systems that 99% of the population couldn't name it. But it controls everything. It controls the money. It controls the future. And when you see how it operates, you won't just be outraged, you'll be horrified. Stay with me. You'll want to know the truth. What controls the system, you ask? It's not the politicians. It's not the media. It's not even the markets, despite what you've been told. It's an organization that moves silently in the background, manipulating economies, shaping policies, and determining the future of entire nations without a single vote cast in its name. This organization is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. But here's the kicker. The IMF doesn't work for the people. It doesn't serve nations in need. It serves the interests of those in power, those who control the purse strings. The IMF's actions are not random. They are part of a long-term strategic plan to ensure that wealth stays in the hands of the few. They create crises. They impose the solution. And in doing so, they lock nations into debt and dependency. This isn't about helping countries, it's about control. And the countries that suffer the most, they don't even realize they're caught in the web. This wasn't always the way things were. There was a time when countries had more power over their own economies, their own destinies. Before the IMF's grip tightened, governments had the authority to make decisions without foreign interference. There was a sense of economic sovereignty. But over the years, something changed. Slowly, quietly. It didn't happen overnight. It never does. The most dangerous shifts are the ones that take years to fully realize. The IMF, once a tool of financial assistance, has now become a tool of domination. What was presented as a lifeline has transformed into a stranglehold, squeezing the life out of nations in crisis. You've been told it's a necessity, that countries need this help to recover. But in reality, the IMF's conditions have done the opposite. They've turned recovery into a mirage, a cruel illusion. And as the years go by, this system grows more entrenched. More countries fall into the trap. More lives are affected. And the world moves ever closer to a future where sovereignty is nothing but a distant memory. Now, let's look at the real-world consequences, the crises that make headlines, but never the full story. Take Jamaica, for example. In the 1,970 seconds and 1,980 seconds, Jamaica was forced into an IMF program. The conditions were harsh. Austerity measures, public spending cuts, privatizations of state assets. The results were devastating. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Schools lacked books and teachers. And yet, the IMF didn't care. The country's debt continued to balloon while the people paid the price. More of the government's budget went to servicing that debt than to essential services like healthcare and education. Jamaica paid more in debt service than it spent on its own future. And that's the IMF's plan. Keep the debt rolling, keep the country dependent, while the wealth keeps flowing to the global north. This wasn't an isolated incident. It's the blueprint. The IMF doesn't help. It deepens the crisis. And it happens again and again. Now, let's turn up the heat. Let's talk about Argentina. In the 1,990 seconds, Argentina was a golden child of IMF reforms. Massive privatizations, deregulation. Sound familiar? The IMF praised it. Argentina, they said, was a model of success. But in 2001, the system collapsed. The currency crashed. Banks closed. Poverty skyrocketed. Millions of middle-class Argentinians who had once felt secure suddenly found themselves on the streets. This wasn't a coincidence. The IMF's measures, instead of stabilizing the economy, set the stage for an even greater disaster. The crisis wasn't the end. It was the inevitable result of the IMF's prescriptions. The IMF didn't care. The loans were repaid. The foreign investors were reimbursed. The people of Argentina, they were left to pick up the pieces of a broken nation. And the IMF moved on to the next country, ready to repeat the process. You might wonder, how does this all work? How does an organization with no accountability to the public wield so much power? Let's break it down. The IMF doesn't just hand out loans. It attaches strings that pull countries into a vicious cycle. Here's how it plays out. When a country falls into crisis, it turns to the IMF for help. In exchange for financial assistance, the IMF demands drastic measures, devaluing currencies, slashing public spending, privatizing national assets. And who benefits from all this? It's the multinational corporations, the wealthy creditors, the foreign investors who snap up assets at fire sale prices. The local population, they bear the brunt of it. They lose their social services, their jobs, their economic stability. So who wins? Not the country in need, not the people suffering on the ground, but the global elite, the ones who can buy up the country's future for pennies on the dollar. It's not a system of aid, it's a system of extraction. And the damage isn't just financial, it's generational. Now, let's make this personal. Imagine waking up tomorrow in a country where your government is no longer in control, where healthcare is a luxury, not a right, where education is a distant dream, where your job is one of the few that hasn't been cut to balance the budget. This is not a distant possibility. This is happening right now across the world. What the IMF does to countries isn't abstract. It's real, it's personal, it's families struggling to survive because their government's hands are tied by IMF-imposed austerity. You may not live in a country under IMF control right now. But understand this, the IMF sets the rules for how the global economy functions. And what happens to one nation ripples through the world, affecting all of us. So, if you're watching this, ask yourself, what will you do when the next crisis hits? When your country becomes the next victim of this system? Will you stand by or will you stand up? This isn't just a local issue. It's not confined to one country, one crisis, or one generation. What the IMF does to a single nation echoes through the global economy. When a country is forced to privatize its industries, cut its spending, and open its markets, the fallout spreads. Look at Greece. The austerity measures imposed by the IMF and its partners in the European Union didn't just wreck Greece. They sent shockwaves through Europe. The crisis spread, unemployment skyrocketed, poverty increased, and a continent that once prided itself on its social system saw them slowly dismantled. This is a global problem, and it's only getting worse. The IMF's policies don't just harm individual countries, they destabilize entire regions, pushing millions into poverty, creating inequality, and forcing countries to bend to the will of foreign investors. The IMF's grip reaches farther than you think, and it's just getting tighter. So, where does this all lead? What's next in this never-ending cycle of debt, control, and exploitation? There are three possible paths ahead. One, asterisk, asterisk, adjustment, asterisk, asterisk. A few countries might resist. They may take the hard route, rejecting IMF conditions, investing in their own sovereignty, and trying to build economies on their own terms. But that's not an easy road. These nations will face immense pressure, both externally and internally, as the system pushes back. Two, asterisk, asterisk, erosion, asterisk, asterisk. For many countries, the pressure will become too much to bear. The IMF's stranglehold will erode their economic independence piece by piece. National sovereignty will continue to crumble under the weight of endless debt repayments and IMF-imposed conditions. They will remain dependent forever, trapped in a cycle of borrowing, cutting, and privatizing. Three, asterisk, asterisk, rupture, asterisk, asterisk. And then there's the third possibility, complete rupture. A nation or a coalition of nations might say no to the IMF entirely. They might reject the entire system of financial colonialism, but doing so would mean going up against the global financial order, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Could a country ever survive without the IMF's control? We don't know which path we'll take, but the future is coming fast, and the clock is ticking. And so we arrive at the inevitable truth. The IMF isn't here to help. It's here to control. The cycle of debt, dependency, and exploitation continues, designed to keep nations in perpetual subjugation. It's financial colonialism, and it's happening right now, all around the world. But the question is, will we continue to accept this? Will we allow this system to keep grinding down the economies and the futures of entire nations, or will we demand something different? The path ahead is unclear. We don't know how this will all play out, but we know one thing for sure: the stakes couldn't be higher. So, what will you do? Will you keep watching as the world turns, or will you start asking the hard questions? This is just the beginning. Stay informed, stay alert, and share this video, because the more people know, the harder it will be for the IMF to keep hiding in the shadows. In my next video, we'll uncover the ways the World Bank works hand in hand with the IMF. We'll dive into the most sophisticated financial system of control ever devised. You won't want to miss it.